Hello, guys, and welcome to my 7 round mock draft of the Chicago Bears. I don't want to do this. As you notice, I'm not even wearing my Packer stuff, but obviously my Packer bias might come into this. We're looking over, they obviously have made some moves. They've, done some things this off season, and I just dread the fact, and I guess I didn't even look at how many picks this team has. How many picks do they have? So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So they have just a regular slate of picks, obviously 2 sevenths, no 6th round. But it's like the thought to me of the Bears getting better, I'm just like, ugh. And I mean, the only thing that I'll say that I'm happy about is it seems like there's a good shot that Ashton Ginty gets drafted before the Bears pick. Their pick 10 and whatever else. But I'm still gonna make this not a joke, of course. I'm gonna be serious about making their team better. And maybe you guys will see some of my bias towards them and towards who they signed and that sort of thing. But let's quickly go over that. They drafted. They picked up Duvernay, Zacchaeus, and then Alexander. I don't know much about Alexander, but obviously Duvernay, kind of a slot speedster guy. Zacchaeus, I feel like I don't know too much about him. Heard the name a number of times. But most notably, they addressed their O-line. Obviously, with Ben Johnson being hired, I'm sure they were like, we're going to go and we're going to look out and we're going to try to replicate what you did on the Lions offense. And I mean, obviously it's a tall task to fix it in one off season. But I think Joe Tooney getting traded, and them giving up a pick for him, we'll see. He's not crazy young or anything, but he's definitely probably an upgrade from what they have. Drew Dahlman, this might unpopular take, but I think Drew Dahlman was surrounded by a very solid offensive line. And not to say that he's not a good center, but when you're surrounded by, pretty solid talent on the O-line, you as a center have it easier because you're never assigned to be the sole proprietor to blocking a top guy, unless they try to scheme him into that sort of situation with like a blitz or whatever. Jonah Jackson, I like it. He was with the Rams, who, the Rams, not this last year, but, years prior were on a O-line carousel. So going and getting him, time will tell. The other thing I want to say about O-lines to me is that it's how they perform as a unit. You have one flaw in your O-line, and teams are going to eat it up. They're going to eat it up, and they're going to exploit it, and they are going to, and that's all you need is one crack on your O-line. And it's, it's much like on defense, where it's like if you have one apparent bad part on defense, the offense just goes after, that weak component all game, and it's like you're only as good as your worst player, so to speak. So we'll see. That is why I'm not going insane like most people, like, oh, hey, they fixed their O-line. Caleb's going to have time. He's going to make all the right decisions. DJ Moore and Odunze are going to have crazy amount of yards. You know, it's like I still saw Caleb miss a number of throws last year when it's like he wasn't under pressure. And then we all know that there was a good amount of times he was sacked that he just held the ball for too long. If he can't hasten his reads, which, you know, if he can't do it after they sign Ben Johnson and he's whispering in his ear, then we've got a real problem. Because you can't tell me that Tyson Badgen's going to do anything. But there's my little rants of what I think a little bit about the Bears. So moving on. Yeah, I'm not going to talk about these other two. I think they got Durham Smythe simply because of the departure of why can't I remember him? The really old tight end. Big Dog is his nickname. Now I can't even remember his name. He even played for the Packers. But moving on to the defense, Grady Jarrett could be a solid move. He's obviously getting a bit older. Deo Adeyingbo is a solid signing, you know, but we'll see. I think Montez Sweat obviously is still going to be your premier guy. I still think that they could still very possibly draft a defensive interior, even though they've got all these guys, you know, on for D tackle and that sort of thing. And obviously, you know, D tackle and a defensive end or pass rusher, there's a lot of it in the draft. And then looking at kind of the rest of it, they didn't need to change much on their defense, of course. You know, they were a good defense. We'll still see if that remains the same without Eberflus. That was the one thing I said about Eberflus, was that his defenses were usually pretty sharp. Obviously, the Hail Mary that they gave up, I mean, that was more of a, you know, Tyreek Stevenson being an idiot type of thing than I think Eberflus's scheme, you know, type of thing. You know, but you know, this defense is, you know, it's solid. You know, Byard, Brisker, Jalen Johnson, Kyler Gordon, who when they were like essentially eliminated was still the only one balling out. I'm like, this guy is playing with more spirit than the rest of the defense. You know, and then Tyreek Stevenson, if he, you know, he needs to not do the dumb crap that he did. But let me go over the draft. You know, there's my 7.5 minute rant on the Bears, you know, just because I feel like, hey, I want to show, you know, truly what I think about this. And as we all know, the oldest rivalry. So, okay, looking at this, we do have Gene T drafted to the Raiders. I've seen him go to the Jaguars. And God, this is so bizarre because people are saying Shedeur Sanders is sliding. But nah, he goes to the Browns. And then Cam Ward, Travis Hunter, which I think, you know, this would be a very solid pick. I feel like the Giants were idiots in bringing in Russell Wilson. I think that's them potentially saying that, like, this is going to be a bum year. We're just going to, like, willfully lose, because I think this will really expose Russell Wilson, that he's not going to do very well without, like, special weapons. And it's like, granted, he has Malik Neighbors, who I feel sorry for. He's going to have to go and he's going to go after balls. But it's like, now looking at all these picks, I do think that the Bears are in the market for a tackle. You cannot tell me, I guess I deleted you cannot tell me they're satisfied with the tackles they have, which they didn't address. Now, Will Campbell, you know, Membu to me, you know, he's a little bit bigger, and, you know, Will Campbell, a bigger guy, I guess he does kind of fit, you know, that Sewell build. Obviously, Sewell's huge. I think he's 340, but this guy's still, you know, he's a big guy, you know, could potentially be a pick here. I've seen people say that they could go Malachi Starks, which, if he goes to their team and then he's performing really well, I'm just going to be like, oh my God, this is going to be one of those situations where my Packers never throw deep on the Bears and whatever else. And it is definitely a potential thing. Now, you know what? I'm going to open it up again. I want to be able to reference it here and really kind of... NFL depth charts. Yeah, sorry about this. It's ridiculous. So let me see here. We obviously have Byard, but the thing about Byard is you look at him, he's older. He's older. He's a good player still, but he's older, which is why I think that the people are saying that, yeah, hey. And then it's like Jaquan Brisker, I think still has, some growing to do and that type of thing. But I think Brisker's good. I just don't think that he's really done what, and then he was on IR, obviously, and it's like he hasn't been able to stay healthy. So safety is definitely a need there. Type of thing. But it's like, look at who we have available, I guess. So we have edge rusher. I don't really think they'd go Mike Green. You could double down, you could double down and grab Luther Burden. And it's like, and that sort of thing. But it's like, and have kind of that electric slot, who I think would be better than either of the two guys you picked up, but it would seem like it would be a really weird move to draft or to grab two guys that are speedsters. Duvernay might only have been for, the returns, to be honest with you. But it's like looking at this, the only two picks I think that would make sense here at 10 would be Malachi Starks or Will Campbell. I think all the other kind of picks would be pretentious. It would be adding more talent to a position you already kind of have. It would be really, it would be such a Bear thing to me if they grabbed Tyler Warren or something. You know what I mean? And then it's like, oh yeah, we have Kmet and we have Warren. Now, granted, Warren, I think higher ceiling, better than Kmet, after getting some experience. But here's what I'm going to say. I think that with the offensive-minded Ben Johnson as your head coach, and with, looking at this, it's like looking at, who your tackles are. Darnell Wright, who it's like, this guy is bigger, but it's like, and, he's not very old. Is he going to be your guy? I don't really see it. And it's like, after how the O-line played last year, I mean, maybe you can fix it. But it's like, you're also going to have to draft a running back that's going to be able to play that Ben Johnson style of football. And then you look at left tackle, Braxton Jones. Braxton Jones, you kind of know what you're getting from this guy. You know what I mean? He's been on IR twice. And it's just kind of like, is this going to be the guy? I think it would be pretty obvious that Will Campbell beats out either of these guys in training camp, or he's an instant starter and he's ranked, 6th. So I'm going to take Will Campbell here, as much as it pisses me off, because they're likely to draft a running back later that's more of a power guy, because we all know DeAndre Swift ain't that. Now, moving on to their round 2 pick, and we've got 2 picks essentially almost back to back. We know that the Saints, they drafted the wide receiver, so they are in the market for a halfback. So looking at this, what are we looking for here? Darius Alexander is kind of a wild card pass rush kind of dude with a good run defense, but is he the guy you want to go for? Demetrius Knight, linebacker, I don't see it. TJ Saunders, this is another pass rush guy who's on the lighter side. I don't really think that's a guy you could go for. Xavier Watts is actually kind of a dude that I like for the Bears. Nah, I don't really like him for the Bears. I'm sorry. Like a guy who's a ball hawker, a guy who can, cover deep. And then it's like, I'm pretty sure, let me see here, played in the slot as well. And it's like, the slot corner, goodness, Kyler Gordon, I don't think you really play him there, but maybe, you have some multiple looks or something, or maybe you're running like you could run Tremaine Edmonds and a 4 cornerback set, and then you have, Byard and Brisker over the top, or, and that sort of thing to plug this guy in. It's kind of one of those that I'm like, I think it's too early. I think, maybe, this guy doesn't line up with your age range either. He's a little bit older, but kind of going and looking here, I don't really see anything that I'm like, let's go and get this guy. Besides defensive interior. I honestly think it might be something where they take a shot at Tyleik Williams, who's obviously a good player, had his injury, I'm pretty sure. Did he have an injury? Now I'm totally like, wait a minute. So this guy obviously being a big guy, maybe he wasn't, God goodness, now maybe I'm thinking of another player, but I honestly think that Tyleik Williams kind of fits that. Doesn't have a high win rush rate, but has a very high run stop rate. So I'm thinking that, maybe they don't go here, but I do think defensive interior for this pick. So TJ Sanders, let me see. Not as good of a run defense, but a pass rush. You see, I just don't see it with him. Darius Alexander, I think, is on the come up. He's done better every single year. And I'm going to pull him for the Bears. Because I think, you get Tyleik Williams in there. He's learning from Grady Jarrett. Couldn't remember his last name. Yeah. And then overall, you get a defensive interior that's taken after this, for the Saints, so good on them. They grabbed, I think, the better prospect than Williams. But looking at this pick, I'm just kind of like, we do have another, top 100 after this. This is obviously pick 41 and we have 72. And I just think that if you're looking at the positions available and who's here, you could go Demetrius Knight. It's, besides Tremaine Edmonds, I don't think, TJ Edwards is, not bad. And then, but then you don't have much at depth. You don't have much at depth here, to be honest with you, in my opinion. So looking at this, I do think that you have the potential to draft a edge player, and, Landon Jackson, I don't think is it. I think if I remember correctly, he's a 3-4 size. Yeah, he's a 3-4 size. Which obviously doesn't work for their 4-3 scream. U-Man is what I'm going to call this guy. Very good pass rush win rate. Seems like a solid option to go and grab this guy and to better your pass rush. Especially in the NFC North where it's like, that the Vikings air it out. The Packers want to improve their pass game. And then it's like, you're playing the Lions too, who it's like they don't really air it out, but you want a guy to go and put pressure on Goff. Now moving on, we have pick 72. I'm kind of thinking in this range that there's, potential for halfback, but let me see who's still available. Devin Neal, who's, who I actually really, really like. But, kind of looking at this on the list, I think it's a bit of a reach to grab him right now. Safety, maybe? I don't see any at the top here. What's the earliest one? An 84, and it's Winston Jr. I've looked at several of these. It's like good run defense grade. Forced incompletion. Oh, he only played in 2 games last year. So let's look at this. Obviously this is probably the reason for his drop in production, because in 2023, he was doing a lot, graded very highly. Games played, coverage, tackles, assist tackles, missed tackles. Kind of hate how they didn't put, let me see this. They do have this guy going to the Bears, funny enough. Yeah, partially torn. So it's only 1 interception in his career. Reaction time can be a tick behind. Usually, it's interesting how they say this down here, but they say that he's got, quick twitch right here. So it's kind of, I think that looking at a guy like this, he is a very good size. He played for Penn State. Perhaps we do take this gentleman. Moving on to our remaining 3 picks. So we're to that phase where we're seeing a couple of, like a QB in here. I do still think we have to draft a running back. Let me look and see who they even have on here besides Swift. So they have Roschon Johnson, drafted, it will have been 2 years ago. I mean, you'd think that if they knew, whether this guy was any good, that, maybe he wouldn't be, that kind of guy, or he would have gotten playing time. I know he got some, but yeah, overall, I just think that, we need to start looking at some of these halfbacks. So zone grade, rushing grade. Zone is what Ben Johnson runs. Gap grade, elusive rating, yards after contact, pretty good. And, had a huge jump in how many, attempts he had this last year, but was able to, play all but 1 game. So and then after that, we have Trevor Etienne. We all know the brother of Travis Etienne. And it's like, so I guess I'm not sure whether he's different from his brother, to be honest with you. Oh, he is short still. And, every down back like his older brother. But yeah, so he looks like a quick and shifty guy. This isn't who they would be going for. This guy either, first look, this guy's lighter, perhaps this is the time. And it's like, then you have Jordan James, who's obviously like way down here at rank 200, way too early to pick him. Kalel Mullins, played for Michigan, played for Harbaugh, obviously, a guy that, can run hard behind there. I'm sure that Ben Johnson would be like, we know that he knows how to run in this kind of scheme. Let's bring him in, type of thing. Now moving on to our final 2 picks within 7 of each other. We have drafted a running back, tackle, interior edge, and safety. I am now thinking potentially that we grab a wide receiver potentially. The thing that I think about with the offense of the offense is that it's like you have Odunze and DJ Moore, and DJ Moore plays bigger than his size. He can go and jump ball and that sort of thing. But Odunze, he's 6'3", but he's not a big 6'3". I think they could use a guy to potentially be that big-bodied wide receiver type of thing. Let me see if there's anybody that I really recognize down here. So we have Jimmy Horn. Let's look here. A 5'10 guy, definitely not. 6'2", but smaller. 6'3", smaller. Let's see if there's even any of these guys that are a bigger dude. So outside, kind of what we're looking for. He is, he's older, but he doesn't have polish. I just don't see him as kind of a guy that they're going for. Rock Taylor, oh my goodness. I looked at this guy, and I forget if it was my prior one, but this guy looks like he's kind of a dark horse sort of. He's a dark horse sort of pick. Like, he has a decent contested catch rate. He's taller, at 6'3" and 215. Just an inch short of being that, Randy Moss size. Is a senior and has, consistently played a lot, the last couple of years, and not much for TDs, I guess, but, a good number of yards. And, I'm going to pick him to the Bears here right now, because I think that they could use a guy like that. Now moving on to the last pick. What do we really think here that they could go for? I'm honestly thinking you might go. I don't think you're going to go inside O-line, to be honest with you. I think they are going to stick with what they have. I think you could go another defensive interior if you really wanted to. But I'm honestly going to look at linebacker. And we're going to go and we're going to look at any of these guys. We're going to look at more coverage guys, because Tremaine Edmonds can cover, but he's also very good against the run. He wraps up a guy. This gentleman here looks like, he has, an okay, run defense grade, but he's smaller in size, So we're going to go on to the next one. And we're kind of looking for if there's any guy that stands out here for, hey, Jalen Walker. Lighter in size. I don't know how this guy would, do in the NFL. He's just not a size that you want. He had his best year in 2022, but he only played 10 games, and he has injury issues, probably because of his size, and he's going to have to, he's obviously going to have to, and I'm sure, Ben Johnson isn't going to want a guy who's that injury prone type of thing. This guy doesn't have it. He's obviously a coverage linebacker, being the lighter size. This guy, run defense is average, lighter as well. Maybe we don't find a linebacker this late in the draft that fits the mold of a run stuffer. I'm just going to look by size, to be honest. We're going to go through several of these guys. Yeah, and there's really nothing here. So I don't think we go linebacker. I think if you go linebacker, we maybe should have looked earlier. But let's see. So we do have a couple safeties here. I guess it wouldn't be outside the realm of possibility to grab another safety. This guy honestly looks like he could be the guy, Malaki Moore. Let's look at the other one, Hunter Wohler, who I'm pretty sure I did draft as somebody. Didn't play every game, but really good forced incompletion rate, but had a really crazy season. Imagine going from Wisconsin to the Bears, He obviously keeps on going down. Oh, he's even been drafted. We're going to draft this guy, It seems like the kind of popular pick. But we'll see kind of what. So Princely, an edge. Landon Jackson, you see. But I said this. But I said this about Landon is that he not as successful of a pass rush, really. I guess an overall draft grade A minus. I kind of resent this because if they were to do this draft on Rock Taylor for whatever reason, I guess it's because we picked him high. But I personally feel like if you add a couple safeties, one of these guys, could be starting, more than likely Kevin Winston. You could, Princely could, potentially start. Darius Alexander, been on the come up, the last few years. Maybe, with one more year of college, or I think he was a senior, it's like one of those things that, hey, it's just kind of one of those things that, hey, yeah, but it's like, if you're a Bears fan, tell me what you think. Tell me if you hate this. I don't think there's much to be said here. I think that you grab the positions of need that you want, and you get Will Campbell, at pick 10. I don't think anybody would be particularly unhappy with that. I mean, the interior of the O-line was the main issue last year, but I also think, there was definitely times when it's like Caleb, was getting picked off the edge. I mean, it wasn't to have the amount of sacks that they gave up. To me, the whole O-line, potentially could be scrapped. It's not one of these situations with the Texans where it's like Tunzel was the only good guy and, the rest was just bad. It's like the whole unit, could need addressing type of thing. And it's like, you could tell me whether or not, Will Campbell's the dude, it's like, and Darius Alexander keeps on going up boards. I mean, this guy, I don't think I was really like looking at, earlier, but yeah, tell me what you guys think. And as always, just to spite the Bears fans, go Pack Go.